Have you ever stopped to think about how you decide what's right and what's wrong? I mean, where does that sense of morality even come from? Well, it turns out the way our brains are wired to think is deeply, fundamentally tied to our moral choices. Today, we're going to trace that incredible line all the way from how a child first learns about the world to how an advanced AI is learning to do the very same thing. So, let's kick things off with the big one. What is the actual connection between our intelligence and our ethics? This is not a new question, not by a long shot. It's a puzzle that philosophers and psychologists have been chewing on for decades. But today, we're going to look at it from a completely new angle. All right, let's just put it right out there. Are smarter people more moral? Look, I know that question sounds a little loaded, but it gets right to the absolute heart of what we're exploring. Is there a real direct line between how we think and how we decide what's good? And you know what? The research is actually surprisingly clear on this. There is a significant link. But, and this is a huge but, it's not that having a higher IQ makes you a better person. Not at all. It's more like it gives you a bigger, more complex mental toolbox to reason about moral problems. Your thinking just becomes more nuanced. You can see more shades of gray. So that begs the next question, right? How do we build that mental toolbox in the first place? To get that answer, we've got to go back to one of the absolute giants of psychology, Jean Piaget. This guy basically gave us the blueprint for understanding how our minds get built, piece by piece, right from the moment we're born. At its heart, cognitive development is really just the story of all of us. It's that incredible journey we all take, from being a baby who can only grasp and cry to becoming an adult who can think about, abstract concepts like justice. And Piaget's huge insight was that we're not just passive sponges. He saw kids as little scientists, actively running experiments to figure out how the world works. Okay, so if we're constantly learning, how on earth does our brain keep it all straight? Piaget's answer was a concept he called schemas. The easiest way to think about a schema is like a mental blueprint, or maybe a folder in your brain's filing cabinet. You've got a folder for dog, a folder for car, a folder for love. It's how we sort and make sense of this crazy, chaotic world. Now, this is where it gets really cool, how we update those mental folders. Piaget said there are two ways we do it. The first is assimilation. Let's say a toddler has a schema for doggy. It has 4 legs, it's furry, it has a tail. They see a poodle for the first time. It fits the folder, so they just assimilate it. Easy. But then they see a cat. Whoa. Okay, it's got 4 legs and fur, but it meows and climbs the curtains. The old doggy folder just doesn't work. So the brain has to do what's called accommodation. It creates a whole new folder called cat. This constant dance between fitting new stuff into old folders and creating new folders for new stuff, that's the very engine of learning. And Piaget didn't stop there. He mapped this whole journey out across 4 major stages. First, from birth to age 2, we're in the sensorimotor stage, basically learning through touching and tasting everything. Then comes the preoperational stage, where we start using language, but our thinking is super literal. Around age 7, we level up to the concrete operational stage, and we can finally think logically about real-world things. And then, the final boss level, the formal operational stage, from 12 onwards. This is where we unlock abstract thought, the ability to reason about ideas like freedom and justice. Each stage is literally built on top of the last one. Okay, so that's how we learn to think. But how does that connect to deciding what's right and wrong? Well, another brilliant psychologist named Lawrence Kohlberg looked at Piaget's work and had a massive aha moment. He realized our morality probably develops in stages too. And he argued that you can't climb his moral ladder without first having built Piaget's cognitive steps. And this right here is the absolute key, the whole connection in a nutshell. You simply can't get to the higher levels of moral reasoning if you don't have the mental hardware for it. The ability to think abstractly has to come first, because you can't reason about abstract principles, like justice, if your brain can't even grasp what an abstract principle is. So Kohlberg laid out 3 basic levels. At the bottom is the pre-conventional level. This is where most little kids are. It's all about me. Morality is just about avoiding punishment and getting rewards. Then most of us grow into the conventional level. Now it's not just about me, it's about us, our group, our society. You follow the rules because they're the rules and you want to be seen as a good person. But then some people reach the post-conventional level. This is where you start thinking about universal principles, things like justice, liberty, and human rights that might even be more important than the laws of your society. And this is a really crucial point to get about Kohlberg's theory. He didn't really care what your answer was to a moral dilemma. He only cared why. Your reasoning was everything. Were you worried about getting in trouble? Were you trying to uphold the law? Or were you thinking about a universal ethical principle? Your why is what told him everything he needed to know about your stage of moral development. Okay, everybody, take a deep breath because we are about to make a hard left turn. We've been talking about classic foundational psychology, but now we're jumping straight into the 21st century. What happens when we try to teach a machine to reason like a human? This is where things get really, really interesting. I mean, think about the leap we're making here. We're going from theories built on observing a handful of kids playing in a room to training a massive artificial intelligence on millions and millions of data points about human choices. And the goal is huge. It's not just to get an AI to mimic our decisions, but to see if it can actually understand the logic, the why behind them. So how are they actually doing this? Well, scientists took a super powerful AI and started training it with a technique called reinforcement learning. It's kind of like training a puppy, but infinitely more complex. They showed it thousands of examples of humans making choices that involved risk. And every time the AI generated reasoning that sounded human, it got a digital treat, a reward. The whole goal wasn't just to predict what we choose, but to explain why. And the specific method they used is just genius. It's called chain of thought. You know how in math class your teacher always demanded you show your work? That's exactly what they're making the AI do. Before it gives an answer, it has to write out step by step its entire reasoning process. And that chain of thought is pure gold for researchers because they can literally peek inside and see if the AI is thinking in a human-like way. So, did it work? After all that training, what did the machine actually learn about us, about how we make choices? Well, the results are frankly incredible, and they reveal a lot about our own minds. I mean, the difference between the AI before and after training is just night and day. At first, the AI was basically a simple calculator. It would just crunch the numbers and spit out a cold, logical answer. But after it was trained on all those real human choices, its reasoning became so much more sophisticated. It went from sounding like a spreadsheet to sounding like a behavioral psychologist, talking about things like risk perception and human biases. So the AI basically reverse engineered the recipe for predicting human choice. Step 1, do the rational math. Calculate the odds, compare the outcomes. But then, step 2, and this is the crucial part, you have to layer on all the messy human psychology. You have to consider our biases, how we feel about risk, and only then can you make a good prediction. And this, to me, is the most stunning part of this whole story. When the scientists looked at the AI's chain of thought, what did they find? The AI had independently identified some of the most fundamental principles of behavioral economics. It figured out that, yeah, we care about the raw numbers, but we're also powerfully swayed by our hatred of losing, our aversion to risk, and our love of a sure thing. The AI essentially rediscovered decades of Nobel Prize-winning research all on its own. So we end up right back where we started, but with a totally new perspective. We've gone from the building blocks of a child's mind all the way to an artificial one that can model our decisions with stunning accuracy. And it leaves us with a pretty heavy question to chew on, doesn't it? If a machine can learn the patterns of our reasoning so well that it can predict our choices, what does that reveal about the very mental processes we think of as so uniquely human? Are they maybe a little more predictable than we'd like to think?